All right, welcome everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen, and today I'm with Katie. Katie, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm really excited to talk about your travel experiences. When I came across you on Instagram, I was really intrigued because in your bio, you have that you have type 1 diabetes, but you're out there adventuring and doing all these, fun hikes and adventures in the mountains. So I was really interested in talking with you about that and how you make that work.
No, thank you so much. I think it's something that's definitely underrepresented. And I know growing up and just someone living with type 1, it's not something that is exposed a lot. So a lot of it has been trial and error. That's part of why my name is Trial on the Trails, because there's so many times you have to try again and again and again until you get it right. And sometimes you won't even get it right. It just gets to work that time. And so
Mhm.
I'm really excited to share and to work with people, especially living with type 1 and their experiences outdoors, not only in the backcountry and up on mountains, but even just getting outside more and feeling comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. I know I have a number of friends who have type 1 diabetes and still want to be active. So I think this is a really good conversation for them to hear. Um, So, kind of started out, give us a little bit of background on type 1 diabetes, what it's like, and how you kind of got into this trials on the trail.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 6, actually on Halloween morning.
Oh,
And
no.
I know my sister was so awesome that day, and she went trick or treating for me and was telling everyone her sister's in the hospital and if they could give her more candy, which sounds so ironic, looking
That's
back.
that's funny.
Yes, but yeah, some common. I lost a lot of weight. I was using the restroom a lot. Extreme thirst, fatigue, frequent urination are often common signs of type 1 diabetes. Unfortunately, at my PCP, which is a primary care provider, I was misdiagnosed with strep throat, which just continued my symptoms, um, meaning that I was not diagnosed until I was in a severe state called diabetes ketone acidosis, often known as DKA. So that is kind of where my journey began at 6, and I think Trials on the Trail almost started then. I remember coming back from being hospitalized and seeing our family jungle gym that was out in our yard,
Hmm.
and I remember running out there and trying to do the handlebars, or sorry, not the handlebars, the, monkey bars. I'm used to riding bikes now, not doing
Yeah.
But, I tried to do the monkey bars and I was too weak, and so I just fell. And I remember my mom and dad, like, teaching, but I remember looking at them and saying, "I'll just try again tomorrow." And so every day I went out and tried the monkey bars until I was strong enough to do them. And I feel like that's a really good analogy for type 1 diabetes is you try again, sometimes you fall, and then sometimes you get stronger, and you're able to finally kind of conquer whatever you just set out to do. Um
Hmm.
And again, a little more background on type 1. So, type 1 is an autoimmune condition where your body essentially attacks beta cells in your pancreas. Your pancreas and the beta cells produce insulin. Insulin breaks down essentially food and glucose, to try to put it as simply as possible. And then this
Okay.
energy allows you to do things like exercise, be outdoors, have energy in general.
Hmm.
Without insulin, your body its own fat muscle state to give itself energy. So those living with type 1 diabetes are insulin dependent, meaning we take injections with insulin or use insulin pumps to help regulate our blood sugar levels. So that's a
Okay.
little, yes. Is that helpful background? Is there,
Yeah. I'm just thinking of a couple of my close friends who have those pumps.
yeah.
And I don't know, it just it for me, like, I don't have type 1 diabetes, and I feel like it's hard for me to imagine kind of what the daily struggle, the daily life is like with that.
Yeah.
Um, is it a lot of adjustments like day to day, or do you have kind of a like once you dial it in and you figure out, okay, this is the right like level for me, are you able to maintain that pretty easily?
No, it's a great question. Often I think it depends on so many things. There's actually a book about like the 42 different factors that affect blood sugar.
Oh
It
gosh.
could be, yeah, I know. So, I mean, I think often, like when I wake up, I think about how well I slept. I think about the exercise I did yesterday. I found a lot the food I ate the day before can affect as well. Um,
Mm,
so for me, it's mainly food, exercise, sleep, and stress. But again, as your friends with living with type 1 probably know, it's different for everyone. And that's something I want
yeah.
to preface as well. These are my lived experiences, but others are different in their own. And so
Mhm.
it is a lot of thinking. Like the other night, I went for a hike at this really beautiful park, and I think about how much elevation I'm gaining, especially living in Colorado. There, you're already living at altitude, but then
Mhm.
say you have a really steep incline, which is going to increase your elevation of your hike. That affects me quite frequently.
Okay.
Just going up quickly. So that's something I've learned. If I go on a hike or something, I will do, fortunately, with an insulin pump, to kind of go back to that, you're able to do what's called a temporary basal. So basal is this baseline insulin that you get throughout the entire day. Someone on injections will take this, a long-acting insulin once or twice a day to keep that stable. But fortunately, with a pump, I can fine tune it. So I think about that. Say before I go out on a hike, a run, backpacking trip, um, biking, skiing, anything like that, I will fine tune my basal rate. So I'll cut back my insulin when I initially start often. Um, Ironically, like rock climbing, I'll have to increase it because my cortisol will go up, my adrenaline. And so I need a little more insulin to compensate for the adrenaline I get with that.
That's funny. I like
It
that.
is, yeah. Or like the food before. You talk about like all the different factors. So especially if I know I'm going on a long hike, anything past like 4 or 5 miles, I know that my it's potential that my blood sugar will drop, which is called
Mhm.
hypoglycemia. When that happens, you need a little bit more fuel or food. And so with that, I will cut back my insulin levels a bit, but I'll also have something really stable like a protein bar, um, coffee for sure. Coffee's necessary for everyone. Um,
Agreed.
yeah, or not. I respect the tea drinkers too. I should drink more water. Also, speaking of water, dehydration.
Mhm.
Dehydration. Uh, Often I find if I'm dehydrated in the morning, I'll get a false blood sugar reading that is higher, so hyperglycemia. So it'll
Okay.
read a little higher if I'm dehydrated, which I find also really fascinating. So it teaches you so many different things about yourself and your body that you are then able to make these new informed decisions or choices. So back to your question too, of thinking of changing it all the time, or if you're pretty steady, it kind of depends on life. If
Yeah.
life is staying pretty steady, often you can ride the wave and go with it. Um, but sometimes if life is changing quickly, or if you have more stress, sleeping less, exercising more, exercising less, changing just the different kind of foods you're eating, or even the different kind of seasons of what activities you're doing. I think often you have to check in and readjust each of those times.
Yeah. That's it's really fascinating to hear you talk about that. I mean, I don't really know much about it, and it just seems like it brings all of the like I think normal struggles that people go through and think about. Like obviously our bodies change day to day depending on what we eat and drink and
Yeah.
stress and all that sort of stuff. But it seems like having type 1 diabetes, like it really brings it to the forefront, and you can really see like, okay, if I do this, it's going to change it this much and that sort of thing. So it just seems like it's really at the front of your mind more.
Kyle, I love how you word things. Like that's such a wonderful way to say that because it's so true. It is always in the forefront. And I was just talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about I just did a trail run in Crested Butte. It was this gorgeous, beautiful trail run. It was 10 miles. It was unsupported, meaning that you are going more over like a mountain loop and there's no like aid stations.
Hmm.
And something that I immediately think of is there are no aid stations. I have to make sure that I have everything I need. Because there's not anybody there to quite help you.
Hmm.
Something are to happen. And I wear what's called a continuous glucose monitor that is extremely helpful. It tells you your blood sugar every 5 minutes and it links to my phone. So I'm able
Okay.
to see trends with my blood sugar and what it's doing, which is in the forefront of your mind because it's in your face all the time. You open your phone and there it is. And growing up, I checked my blood sugar 3 to 5 times a day. And now it's every 5 minutes I see a reading.
Hmm.
So it does put it more in the forefront in the things that you're doing. But I found it so fascinating because during this trail run, um, I was only up there, I think, a little over 48 hours. And these sensors last for 10 days, but I had two fail back to back on me.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah, I had no visual of my blood glucose. And I did have a brief moment of, oh no, like I'm so used to this. But then I feel, oh, yeah, I'm so used to seeing this all the time. You can predict it, you can see patterns, you can see if it's going up quickly, you can see if you're dropping quickly, and then hopefully catch it. It's a great way of prevention, but catch it before you get too low or too high.
Hmm.
And but I had this moment, and I was like, you know what? This is actually wonderful. This is great. And I took that mindset because it didn't make type 1 the forefront of my run that day. It didn't make it where I was constantly looking at my phone during this beautiful run. I was looking at the mountains, I was looking at the trail, I was looking at the aspen trees the leaves are just changing. So I
Hmm.
took this approach where type 1 just got to come along for the ride that day. It didn't get to be my forefront. Because it often is. Like you said, it's something you have to constantly think about, with what you're doing. And that in a way was a really wonderful experience, even though my initial reaction was, "Oh, no."
Yeah.
It was this wonderful experience of going back to basics, of really trusting yourself and your body. There's only so much with type 1 you can control, and you can control what you
Mhm.
can. And the rest, I think you have to trust yourself more, and that's what I hope people hear, and I hope to even learn myself, is trusting myself more, where you take care of yourself every day. There's very few conditions where you leave a hospital or a clinic and you are in sole control of your care. In control of how much medication you're giving yourself, which can cause drastic outcomes for you. You
Mhm.
are in control of how mentally you have to handle that. You're in control of the stress it can cause. You're in control of all these different aspects. And then oftentimes you're not too. So even doing everything right and being super prepared, which I think is for me the number one thing, especially going into the backcountry, having everything that you could need and more. My pack is
Mhm.
always the heaviest, I feel. Um, is shows that even things can happen. And going back to basics, so I then used a blood glucose meter halfway through the race. And
Okay.
yes, so making sure you have backups. I would not have been confident, nor would it have been safe most likely for me to do that without a meter. You can go to a Walmart, a Walgreens, something like that, and pick up a meter, even though it's out of pocket. But that's something really important you would need to do to monitor yourself. But yeah, so being able to kind of take diabetes away from that forefront during that run was really powerful to me this weekend because it reminded me that I am more than that. Often
Mhm.
identities kind of change potentially, I feel like, and it becomes a label versus it coming along for the ride.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think having had that experience now, you'll maybe like not look at your phone so much, every 5 minutes when it pops up? Do you think you'll like ignore it a little bit more, or just
No,
um
yeah.
yeah.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, I think I will definitely take because it doesn't, you have it like the app is open, so um
Okay.
it only alerts you with the presets. So you can preset it to different levels to alert you if you don't feel comfortable within those bounds or the
Okay.
range, so to speak. But no, that's a great point because I find myself often looking at my phone so often
Hmm.
and it is not helpful. A lot, I mean, it's very, very helpful, but it's not helpful how often I look at it. So I do think it'll change that. More so when I am doing things that I love and enjoy, like biking and running and things of that nature, because it'll allow me to trust my body a little more and
Hmm.
remind myself that, yeah, it's going to come along for the ride and I will handle it however it is handled in that moment because it could change every time.
Yeah.
It's also nice. It does link to if you have a smartwatch, it can link to your smartwatch and alert you. So I think that's
Okay.
another, yeah, it's really cool. So I think that's a feature I'll start using more is just looking at my watch if it alerts versus continuing to look at my phone.
Hmm.
Um, and then knowing that if it alerts, I should pay attention to it. But besides that, I'm probably in a good state and to trust that I can stay there and continue on with what I want to be doing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Um, so being out in Colorado, obviously there's a lot of amazing places to hike and
Mhm.
run and do all this sorts of outdoorsy stuff. Um, so how did you get into trail running and just being out in the mountains? And how often do you do that? And I have some more follow-up questions on that, but just kind of tell me how you got into that and what it's been like so far.
Absolutely. I love that question because it's become such a big, growing, healing, wonderful part of me is being in the outdoors. So I actually moved to Colorado in 2016. I had an internship here in 2015. So kind of background, I worked at a diabetes clinic for a while as a research coordinator and then a patient navigator and doing education in clinic, which was really wonderful. But again, it kind of took type 1 and made it my whole entity.
Yeah.
It's the reason I was in Colorado and um, the reason why I got to be in this beautiful state. So I started doing a lot more hiking. I feel really fortunate. I grew up in Ohio with a really wonderful family who love the outdoors, loves camping, being outside. But it is different, right? There is a little bit of a different
Hmm.
atmosphere in Colorado and different opportunity. And so I started trail running just as a way back in 2016, just as a way to one, still connect with what I did in Ohio because I would run there. And that's what I knew how
Hmm.
to do here. So I actually did not know how to ski, mountain bike, or rock climb when I came here. Um, and I knew none of those. So I would run a lot and I snowshoed because they were not expensive and
Hmm.
they were accessible to me at the time. I wasn't in a position that I could do more things like I suppose backpacking too. Backpacking I've always really loved, but I didn't have access to the other things. And then fortunately, as I worked full time, I actually worked two jobs and went to grad school and really started wanting to do more. And I fortunately then met my now husband who grew up in Colorado, loved skiing and mountain biking and all these things, and was patient enough to introduce me. I will also say it was I'm so grateful he did, and then I was also willing to learn. I really wanted to do those things. And so I ended up getting a mountain bike February of 2020, right before COVID, which was great timing for me.
Yeah.
Um, really great timing for me. And I also really want to acknowledge there was a friend's roommate who gave me her old pair of skis, which was huge. Um, I could not afford skis. I couldn't afford a ski pass. Like I said, I was working two jobs full time, plus going to grad school full time. And it just really wasn't in the cards for me. My mindset was very focused on I have to work and go to school to then earn these things and to
Mhm.
learn them. And then I had also some girlfriends who taught me how to rock climb in the gyms. And this all happened like at once. So it was like mountain biking, skiing, and rock climbing. I'm just gonna learn it all at once. And it was this wonderful opening of my mindset. So my girlfriends taught me how to rock climb in the morning and built this confidence where I used to always think like I just had to know how to do something or I just wasn't going to be good at it.
Mhm.
And rock climbing really taught me that you really had to practice and try and gain strength from it. And kind of to tie it back with living with type 1, I think it really helped my mentality with that as well. Is it's just not always going to work the first time. And again, it goes back to trials on the trail. It may not always be the first time that something works out. You have to trial it again and again.
Mhm.
A trail can be anything, right? It can be any of these activities, or it can just be going around the block, or how to handle working with food, all different aspects. So I got fortunately into rock climbing from my girlfriends in the morning. We'd go at like 6 a.m. to go climb before work. And it just brought about this beautiful community and again helped my mindset of I don't need to focus so hard on these two jobs in school. I'm allowed to also enjoy this part.
Mhm.
And then mountain biking, I fortunately lived in a town where trails are really accessible. So I just kind of, again, with the help of my now husband, kind of got me into it. But then I would just go out on my own and try again and again and again to mountain bike. I remember I went by myself, which you should always have a buddy. I will preface that highly. Things happen, but
Yeah.
I would pick trails that I knew would be populated at the time when I was going by myself, which I often did. And I remember like the first few times I was going downhill and I would get so scared and I would just like hit my brakes and pull over. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is terrifying. Um, and then it turned into like this freeing feeling of just being able to fly up and down the mountain. And thinking of type 1 with that too was okay, who's around? What if something happens? But it was that practice of again and again of building trust, not only in my biking skills, but in my managing of my type 1 and how that would go with it. And
Mhm.
similar to skiing, I found when I got better at skiing, then my stress levels depleted a bit. And so my blood sugars were better,
Yeah.
which, yeah, so it was also remembering that type 1 is in the forefront, but also sometimes thinking about more of what you are doing in these different activities, and that once you get more comfortable, it'll probably kind of come along with it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you first started learning how to ski, mountain bike, rock climb, all those sorts of things, did you have any major problems or issues with the type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, I would say I'm trying to think. So, yeah, I found out rock climbing, I was so confused why my blood sugars were high.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it had to do with if it was in the morning, which is when your cortisol levels are higher anyway. So, when you first wake up, all those hormones hit, they automatically increase your blood sugar. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. It's called dawn phenomenon. And so learning that I was had adrenaline coming from knowing I was gonna go rock climbing, not really knowing what I was doing at first, which just made it extrapolate. Um, and then 2, seeing my blood sugars go up sometimes causes me some stress as well because I don't like seeing them go up.
Mhm.
So learning how to give more insulin before or what I was gonna eat and knowing that I was gonna be okay during that. Um, and that was similar with skiing. I would say biking and trail running are the 2 that cause my blood sugar to go lower. So, low meaning hypoglycemia. And in those 2 instances, biking I thought was gonna increase my blood sugar because it was adrenaline, it was some stress, it was a little more risky, in my opinion, than doing some indoor climbing in the morning with around a bunch of people that I knew versus riding often by myself on trails
Hmm.
or around more people I didn't know. So there were definitely a couple times I've had to pull my bike over to treat lower blood sugars that were further back. But I think it goes back to being prepared, fortunately. I always have a ton of glucose on me. I usually use Honey Stinger, Bolt.
Those are good.
I know they're so good. Like the waffles or the little like energy
Yes.
bars. Yes. You have good experience with those?
Yeah, yeah. So I do long distance running. I actually
Mm.
did my first marathon was in Boulder.
Oh,
Uh,
congrats.
yeah, and I use the Honey Stinger waffles and the little gels.
Mhm.
Um, I think that they're great and they really help because even without diabetes, you can still have lower blood sugar when you're running
Yes.
a really long race.
Absolutely, and I think that's the other thing those living with type 1, like, should or need to hear is blood sugar affects other people's bodies too. It's just you're not seeing
Mhm.
it all the time like we are. Like you're saying, like, on
Yeah.
my phone, I see it all the time, and that it's normal that our blood sugars fluctuate. Um, someone living with type 1 is gonna fluctuate more than someone who is not because their body can regulate it. But at the same time, I think that's another kind of learning curve with living with type 1 is yes, there's so much more thought and you have to be your own machine, but that it is normal for the body's blood sugar to fluctuate, and that that's okay. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of helps put it into perspective. I'm so happy you brought that up. I remember I did a actually in Boulder, I did a triathlon with a friend, and she wore a continuous glucose monitor during it, and she is one of the most fit, active, athletic people I know. And her blood sugar during the race was technically hyperglycemic, so higher than normal range. And we're thinking it had to do with the stress and adrenaline. And it was, I remember ending the race, kind of like, oh, wow, like not happy that happened to her, but it was this eye opening event for me to see because my blood sugars were higher during the race, even though when I was training, I was constantly consuming glucose. But it was
Hmm.
because I'm in this setting of adrenaline and a little more stress of the actual event as
Yeah.
well. Again, that's my lived experience. Someone else, maybe your friends have different ones. But I found it so fascinating that hers was increased as well as someone living without type 1. And it kind of gave that was a wonder again, this eye-opening experience that allowed me to kind of have a better understanding of, okay, yes, I have to do more work and I am my own machine to handle this, but this happens to other people too.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it would make sense that being in an actual event, you're gonna spike a little bit higher
Mhm.
versus your normal training where you're used to it and it's not pressure filled. There isn't that, competition atmosphere.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm curious when you're going on these, long trips or going up into the mountains or a, backcountry trip or something like that. What necessities do you bring with you on those?
Yes, probably more usually more than I ever need, which is great. I would say that's important. Like I said
Mhm.
earlier, my pack, I think, is always the heaviest.
Yeah.
I'm always yeah, I'm always prepared. Often it's longer, but even if it's a day trip, I'll bring enough glucose for 3 days because I feel like you never know
Mhm.
what could happen, and I don't really wanna find out, hopefully.
Yeah.
So my necessities, first and foremost, is a glucagon. So glucagon is an emergency kit. They did just make a new one, which is great. It's more user friendly. It's a spray up your nose.
Wow.
Another one that's a injection, so a syringe and a vial. And
Hmm.
glucagon, I think most people think it's a sugar and it, like, wakes you up if you were to have a really low blood sugar. So that's kind of entering a little bit of a more dangerous zone, if you have a really low blood sugar and you use a glucagon, which are extremely necessary and have done really well for people when they hit an extremely low blood sugar. for an extended period of time. But what glucagon actually does, it activates, I'm going to say this, sorry, incorrectly, but so it activates the glucagon source within you, like within your own body, in your liver, and it produces a reaction. So it activates that within your own body to be able to bring your blood sugar up. So that is, yeah. So that's kind of, that always in the back of my mind gives me this sense of safety. It's if, you know, if anything happens, fortunately have never used one.
To me, it sounds like a little bit like an EpiPen type of thing.
Yeah, no, yes, that's, and I would say it's like an EpiPen for those living with diabetes. Yes, it's
okay. I'm wrapping my head around it now.
Yeah, right. No, and it's such a, I so appreciate, I've worked in diabetes for so long. It's so nice to talk, one, on your podcast, and two, about something to help like more generalize it as well, because it gets so specific. It's good to have comparisons and to be able to be like, oh, it's similar to that, or you're able to kind of connect it.
Yeah.
So yes, it would be, yeah, in a similar sense to that. But so that would raise your blood glucose. You would need to be really careful afterwards after using it. But again, it's, for me, in the back of my mind, that's always like my baseline secure safety is my glucagon. So that always comes with me. I always want to bring a protein, because and that usually comes in the form of some kind of protein bar, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And the reason that I do that is because I've found, again, through trial and error, that when I just take fast acting glucose, like we just talked about, like honey stinger gels, what occurs is my blood sugar will go up, but then it'll come kind of right back down. So it gives me that quick source of energy or activation, but it doesn't necessarily always stabilize it. So often when you're then able to have a protein after, it allows you to stay more stable and keep your, yes, yeah, keep it higher for a little while. Another thing is, if you have a low blood glucose, the chances of you having another one increase. So once you have one, it's more likely you're going to have more frequent ones in the next day or so. So I was, yeah, so I pack a lot of food. I always joke with my friends, like, if you guys need food, I'm the person to go to. Because I have a lot. But yes, like the honey stingers, gels. I really like the Go-Go Squeeze applesauces.
Oh yeah, those are good too.
They're great. Yeah, and they're easy to pack. I used to do a ton of juice boxes. So, but then I find that when your pack is heavy and you hit it against things, they explode. And then there's like juice all over your pack, and animals and bears are real here, so you need to be careful.
That sounds like one of those trials and errors.
Yeah, yeah. Or like in college when it like got all over my paper that was due that day.
Oh no.
I know my professor was like, well, I was like, can I please go print this again? I promise I did my paper. My juice box exploded all over it. And they're like, you are an adult. Why are you kidding around juice boxes?
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah, it was pretty great. So juice boxes, I don't really do as much. But actually, one of my more favorite things that has been a bit more recent has been doing a Gatorade powder in water. So I can dilute it how I want. So if I want it more concentrated or less concentrated, and I'll put it in a bladder or a water bottle, and I'll sip on that on some of my longer things, and it seems to keep me more stable. So, and I'll do a little Gatorade, a little water, just to kind of even it out. But the Gatorade mix in the powder form, I find, is really nice. I usually keep it in a little like Ziploc baggie. It could maybe look suspect, but I make sure it's blue, and so it's like, no. I'm like, oh, that could look weird. But I have like a little Ziploc baggie full of powder. I can always add in my water as well, which is super helpful. And then I always have a backup blood glucose meter with me. Like just this weekend, both my sensors failed, which normally never happens. But thank goodness I had that, or I myself don't feel like I could have safely run that race. And then I always do have a backup sensor. and I have backup pump supplies, as well as I always bring a syringe and a vial of insulin. So if I have multiple pump failures or something of that nature, meaning that the insulin pump either maybe it fell off, it got knocked off, it's kinked and is not adequately giving me the insulin I need, I can
Hmm.
then draw up an insulin syringe and give myself insulin as well. Because it's just as dangerous to go have a really high blood sugar for an extended period of time as it is to have a low for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious, carrying all those things, obviously like on a backpacking trip, that's gonna be a little bit easier. But
Yep.
I'm just imagining like if you're skiing or
Oh,
something like that,
mhm.
how do you have to keep those nearby or on you at all times, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think another thing just to mention too is temperature. So insulin vials, things of that nature are temperature sensitive.
Hmm.
Um, and even low treatments. And by low treatments, I mean the glucose I carry with me. So as we mentioned, honey stingers, Gatorade, things like that. Another thing about juice boxes is they freeze. So if you're in your car or you're skiing, they don't work great unless you want a popsicle. Um, but so what I usually do when I'm skiing or mountain biking or even trail running, I usually just keep an insulin syringe and maybe a vial of insulin in my pack. Or fortunately, in
Okay.
my ski jacket, there's lots of different pockets.
Mm.
Um, Skiing is going to be the most temperature concerning one. And so
Yeah.
I'll keep it in the inside pocket of my jacket closest to my chest
Okay.
there. Um, and then treatments I usually just keep in my pockets and I'll pick ones that won't freeze as much. So more like the gels, um,
Hmm.
honey stinger waffles or the chews. Even like the applesauces don't seem to freeze, or at least if you keep them close to body heat. So that stuff I actually I'll keep minimal on me for those events just because I am not super far from my car often.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go a few hours, well, low you should treat right away. But say I had my pump failed or something of that nature, I would have about an hour or two to be able to get to my car and change that out if I needed. So
Okay.
for those things, that's a great question. Yeah, I often actually won't carry them on me, knowing that I could get to my car. Say for like
Mhm.
backcountry skiing or something, I'll have a pack on anyway because you need avalanche gear, and so I'll
Yeah.
be able to put it in my pack. Because in that case, you're not really sure when you could get back to your car. But something
Hmm.
more like if you're skiing at a resort, there's typically you can kind of guess or estimate when you could get back to your vehicle. So those I will keep in my car in a bag, which has worked really well. Or even biking, I know how to, how quickly I'll be able to get back to my car. And it's more in those moments I'm more concerned about low or hypoglycemia than I would be about a pump failure and being able to get back in that time.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, you kind of brought it up there. One of the questions I had was, um, you know, if you're going on an extended trip, maybe up into the mountains, uh, I was wondering, one, it's my understanding that you got to keep the insulin at a certain temperature,
Yes.
and then does it go bad after a certain amount of time?
Yeah, it can, especially with heat. Is that kind of what you're referring to, or just like the amount of time it's open?
Yeah, just in general, like if you're going on a 7-day trip, can you be fine with with one vial that you have the whole trip or something like that?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. So usually if you don't open a vial of insulin, approximately it'll expire after 1 year. I'm sure you could talk to
Okay.
your friends and many people, and many different things have been done if it's not opened. But that would be the recommendation, is it expires after a year. And then the other recommendation is once you open that insulin, so once you pop the top off the vial, once you open an insulin pen, it's approximately 28 days to expire.
Okay.
So you have some time. But that also depends on how you're storing your insulin. So when it comes to when I'm in the backcountry or traveling or taking a trip, I always bring multiple vials of insulin. because it just, I mean, you could drop one and it breaks the vial,
Mhm.
or you could lose one, or one could be spoiled because you went out in the sun at the beach or wherever. So I'll take multiple, but also I carry around what's called a Frio packet. And Frio, it's so interesting to me that it's like these little gel beads. And if you put them in the water, they break into like a gel and they keep your insulin packet. So I use Frio a lot, is what it's called, Frio. And it's a little portable insulin cooler. So just trying to even imagine, it's probably the size of a, is this little packet you can put a vial of insulin in or insulin pens
Mhm.
to be in that heat for longer and take that insulin with you without as much concern with spoiling.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like heat is more the issue.
I That's what I found. I guess with an insulin pump too, it's on your body, and so that body heat helps keep the insulin at a decent temperature from freezing. I have not experienced an insulin vial freezing, so I am curious now if that has happened to someone. I mean, you definitely should not keep it in your freezer.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, and then also
Um,
if it does freeze, you shouldn't use it because once it unfreezes, the enzymes and everything that are, made to make insulin are not going to break down like they should.
hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically, I mean, it should freeze around 32 degrees since it is a liquid, but I have not had experience with that.
Okay. Have you been on any trips where you've been maybe like camping out and it gets below freezing at night and had issues with that sort of thing?
I have not, fortunately. I have been out overnight in freezing weather, and then I've been out for full days in sub-zero temperature, and I have not had that. I will say keep so the insulin pump is under all those layers, so I think that is
Mhm.
helpful for keeping that insulin nice and warm.
Yeah.
Um, and then also if I carry an backup insulin with me, like I said, I'll keep that in tucked in the inside pocket of a jacket so that it's
Mhm.
as close to my body as possible to keep it at a good temperature.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I have not experienced it, but I am intrigued if anybody has.
Yeah, I'll have to ask my friends that, or if anyone listening to this knows, that would be
Right?
interesting.
Yes, let Kyle and Katie know.
Yeah. Um, so what big trips do you have coming up or any interesting things planned?
Yeah, I am really excited to get abroad again. I've not been abroad for a hot second, and I'm very excited for that. So I'm actually just last night. It's amazing you asked that. We just planned a trip to Whistler over New
Okay.
Year's. Yeah, so that would I say I would say that's the biggest trip kind of coming up. Um, and that'll be fun. So that'll be skiing and snowshoeing. And so maybe we will have this insulin freezing experiment happen.
Yeah, yeah, you'll have to let me know how it goes.
I will, yeah. So I think that one will be really fun. We're gonna fly into Seattle and then drive up to Vancouver and Whistler and ski. So that'll be extremely exciting. Might try to get another backpack trip in, but that would be probably in Colorado. Although
Mhm.
I would love to go do a bit of the PCT at some point. There's it's so wonderful. There's so many different things. It's like, oh, what's next? What's next? But yeah, right now what I can actually like hone in and focus on is yeah, just planning a trip to Whistler um over New Year's, which will be really wonderful.
Yeah,
And
that should be a fun time to go up there.
yes, have you been?
I've not been to Whistler. I've been to Vancouver, but I'm up here in Washington State, so
Oh,
uh,
nice.
yeah, I know very well about the cold in the the mountainous areas. My plan is today, in a few hours, to head up to the North Cascades National Park.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
So yeah, yeah, it should be fun.
Okay, if you have any tips, please let me know. I would love to hear about it. We can add it into our trip.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's I know the North Cascades in particular is a hard one to access.
Hmm.
Um, very, very rugged terrain, very I would say somewhat similar to Colorado.
Yeah, I would say I have not been up there yet. I would love to visit.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've gotten to spend a lot of time in Colorado and Washington. And honestly, they're my two favorite states.
Yeah,
I think the two states that have the best mountains too.
yeah, we're really lucky.
Yeah, you're talking about the rock climbing earlier, and it reminded me of when I was in Boulder and was hiking the Flatirons. I was watching guys rock climb up the side of those,
Yeah.
which those are just steep, smooth rocks, and I'm like, there's no way I would do that.
I know it's amazing like what people love to do and then other things it's like, oh, not that one, and we'll leave it to those
Mhm.
guys going up the slick slab or girls.
Ooh, sorry, I got to laugh in there. I'll cut this out.
Yeah.
um, Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Uh, but yeah, no, I would leave the rock climbing to others, and I'll just watch them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Uh,
definitely riskier.
yeah. What what's been like maybe one of your favorite trips that you've gone on, like favorite hiking trips or running or whatever it is, and maybe what's been something you've, I guess, considered a really successful trip.
Mhm. I really like that question. I think my favorite backpacking trip was one I did in Canada. And we went through Banff, Jasper. It was gorgeous. And I actually did it with a group called Connected in Motion. And it's a group that um, they mainly are for adults living with type 1 diabetes. And they do different like backpacking trips and weekend trips. And it's not so much, you know, all it is about diabetes because everybody there has it, but it's more of living in community together and doing that adventure, having similar like trails and trials, right? So
Mhm.
I would say that's a really incredible anyone listening who is living with type 1 or anyone in general who wants to look up Connected in Motion is a really wonderful group. And to me, that was successful because I think I realized other people living with type 1 are thinking about this all the time too. I mean, we spent 10 days in the backcountry in Canada and it was absolutely wonderful. It definitely took some mental burden off being around a lot of other people living with it as well and
Yeah.
understanding, who are also kind of looking out for you. That was really, really nice. But then also that I think led to a lot more success in the backcountry in my own backpacking trips in general because it instilled this confidence in me and knowing that other people are doing this too, and then how I can successfully do it without this constant like fear or thinking about it all the time.
Mhm.
So that was definitely one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
um,
And you guys probably all had a similar weighted pack.
yes, yeah, yeah, yes, which was a watch.
Uh,
Because it's like everybody's pulling everything out of their pack that they can,
yeah.
which was pretty great.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I'm sure it's like you said, it's nice to have other people that understand and are dealing with the same thing to just be around them, and I'm sure it felt really comfortable.
Yes, yeah. And again, I think it's success is different every time. I think I could be on a beautiful trail, but if I have a thought or fear or worry constantly, it's not going to make it as beautiful. And so,
Mhm.
success to me has really been trusting myself and my management and starting small, right? Like I said, I didn't know how to ski or rock climb or bike until a little later than most people who grew up, especially in Colorado, in life.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then adding in living with type 1 with it is this whole other dimension that has built this shift of mindset and this trust in myself and a growth mindset of I'm going to learn, I'm going to continue to be successful. So as much as I love that trip and that was successful, I would still like to think my most successful trips are still to come.
Mhm.
Um, because I think I'm going to continuously grow and learn and be better and better. And after every experience, you gain confidence from knowing what you just did and what you can really still do.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you put that. Well, Katie, any last piece of advice for listeners or people living with type 1 diabetes or anything else that you want to say?
Well, I just want to say thank you again for reaching out. I've been listening now to your podcast after you reached out, and I love how you are bringing in all different groups of people and their travel experience instead of just one thing specifically. Being common ground. And then too, if anybody ever wants to reach out, I do trials on the trail at gmail.com or my Instagram. Go ahead and reach out. I really believe in just people being outdoors and outside in any aspect that's to them. And again, I think it's, yeah, living confidently through each trial and each trail we encounter. And you're going to gain confidence each time, even if that's a small step or a small beginning.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think, you never know what you can achieve unless you try. And
Yes,
you're gonna fail. Obviously, there's gonna be trials where you fail, but like you said, you're gonna learn and grow and get better from it.
absolutely. And just, yeah, knowing it's not going to be perfect at first. And it's going to make it so much better when you get to the point where you thought you may never be.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love it. Well, Katie, thanks again. This has been a really informative and interesting episode for me. I've really enjoyed it, and I know the listeners will too. So thanks for taking the time to do it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, any questions, reach out, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again, Katie, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
Yes, agreed.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Stay well.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify and Anchor. And now you can also listen on YouTube. Links are in the description below. If you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page and or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my new show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to discuss one specific travel topic, whether that be questions I get from listeners, sharing some souvenirs that I've bought over the years, or discussing one particular city or country that I've been to, and so much more. You'll be able to listen to that via Spotify and Anchor as well, and be able to see the video version, which I'm really excited about, on YouTube. So check it out. I promise you won't be disappointed. And thanks again for listening, and I will see you around the world soon.